The tinted glass of the VIP lounge seemed like a shield for Adrian's dark secrets. He swirled his 18-year-old scotch, smirking at Chloe, his mistress, who believed she had secured the bag. Adrian was hours away from signing a deal with a mysterious angel investor to save his crumbling company, confident his wife Mufra was home knitting. He was wrong. When the lounge doors slid open, Adrian didn't see a stranger walking in. He saw Sarah. She wasn't there to save him. She was his reckoning. She held the checkbook, the power and the match to burn his life down. The air inside the sovereign first-class lounge at JFK Terminal 4 didn't smell like an airport. It smelled of bergamot, aged leather, and the specific crisp scent of money. It was a world away from the chaos of the security lines below a sanctuary where the silence was heavy and expensive. Adrian Sterling adjusted the cuffs of his bespoke navy suit, catching his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the tarmac. At 42, he looked every inch the tech mogul he pretended to be. His jaw was sharp, his hair graying perfectly at the temples, a distinguished look that his PR team insisted tested well with shareholders. "You're vibrating," a soft voice purred from the plush velvet armchair behind him. Adrian turned. Chloe was sipping a mimosa. Her legs crossed a diamond tennis bracelet, Adrian's gift from last Tuesday, glittering on her wrist. She was 24, a marketing intern who had quickly marketed herself into Adrian's bed, and she hoped onto his bank account. She was beautiful in a terrifyingly precise way, perfectly highlighted blonde hair, filler-enhanced lips that always looked slightly parted, and eyes that assessed the value of everything they touched. "I'm not vibrating," Adrian lied, though his hand shook slightly as he reached for his double espresso. "I'm focused. This meeting is everything, Chloe. Everything." "It's just an investor, babe," Chloe said dismissively, checking her reflection in her phone screen. "You've charmed hundreds of them. That's what you do. You're Adrian Sterling. You talk and people throw money at you." Adrian clenched his jaw. If only she knew. The narrative outside these walls was that Sterling Dynamics was the pioneer of next-gen AI logistics. The reality was that Adrian was bleeding cash. He had leveraged the house in the Hamptons, the penthouse in Tribeca, and emptied the joint savings account he shared with his wife, Sarah. He was 3 weeks away from bankruptcy. This silent investor was his last lifeline. The broker, a nervous man named Simon, had set it up. "She's eccentric," Simon had said. "She represents a massive private equity trust. She wants to meet at the airport before she flies to Zurich. If she likes you, she signs a check for 20 million today. 20 million. It would cover the debts, the embezzlement he was trying to hide from the board, and the lifestyle he was currently funding for Chloe." "You shouldn't have come," Adrian murmured, checking his Rolex. "If Simon sees you—" "Simon isn't here yet," Chloe pouted, standing up and walking over to him. She placed a manicured hand on his chest. "Besides, I'm your executive assistant for the weekend. Remember, we have that conference in Zurich." Adrian looked at her desire warring with anxiety. That was the plan. Secure the funding fly to Zurich with Chloe. Celebrate the victory, and come home to Surah with a generic gift and a lie about exhaustion. "Just sit over there when they arrive," Adrian instructed, gently pushing her hand away. "Look busy. On your laptop. Don't smile at me like that." "Like what?" Chloe smirked, tracing the lapel of his jacket. "Like you own me." Chloe laughed, a tinkling sound that drew the attention of a weary businessman in the corner. "But I do, Adrian. Doesn't it feel good?" She walked back to her seat, sashaying her hips, confident in her victory. In Chloe's mind, the war was already won. She knew about Sarah. Adrian described his wife as a homebody, a woman who had let herself go, a bore who cared more about her garden and her charity auctions than her husband's needs. Chloe felt a smug pity for Sarah. It was a survival of the fittest world, and Chloe was simply fitter. Adrian checked his phone. No texts from Sarah. Good. She was probably at her pottery class or having tea with her sister. Sarah was predictable. Safe. Boring. She had been with him since college, back when he was driving a rusted Honda Civic and eating ramen. She had supported him while he built the company, handling the boring stuff. Taxes, household logistics, emotional support, while he handled the glory. He had outgrown her. That's what he told himself. A CEO needed a partner who looked good on a yacht, not one who worried about the carbon footprint of the yacht. Mr. Sterling, the concierge, a woman with an immaculate bun and a tight smile, approached their area. Adrian straightened up, buttoning his jacket. Yes, your guests have arrived. They are being escorted up now. Adrian's heart hammered against his ribs. This was it. The poker face slid into place. He looked at Chloe. Laptop, now. Not a word unless spoken to. Chloe rolled her eyes, but opened her MacBook Air, pretending to type. The frosted glass doors of the private suite slid open. First entered Simon the broker. He looked sweating, his tie slightly askew, clutching a briefcase like a shield. He looked pale. Terrified, even. Adrian, Simon squeaked. They're here. Good, Adrian said, extending his hand, projecting confidence he didn't feel. Let's get this done. Adrian, Simon whispered urgently, leaning in. I didn't know. I swear to God I didn't know until 5 minutes ago, when I saw the ID. Didn't know what? Adrian snapped. Then the second figure entered. It was a woman. She was flanked by 2 large men in dark suits who looked less like bodyguards and more like military contractors. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere coat that probably cost more than Chloe's car. Her sunglasses were oversized tortoiseshell, hiding her eyes. She wore a silk scarf wrapped around her head, vintage Hollywood style. She moved with a grace that was predatory, silent, and fluid. She didn't look at Adrian. She walked straight to the head of the low conference table and sat down. One of the bodyguards immediately placed a heavy metal briefcase on the table. Adrian frowned. He didn't recognize her, but the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The air felt thinner. Welcome, Adrian said, stepping forward with his best charming smile. I'm Adrian Sterling. It's a pleasure to finally meet the visionaries behind the Artemis Trust. The woman said nothing. She slowly reached up and removed her sunglasses. Chloe from her corner looked up, bored. Then she froze. Adrian blinked. His brain short-circuited. He knew those eyes. They were hazel flecked with gold. He had looked into them thousands of times. He had looked into them over breakfast this morning when he lied about his flight time. The woman unwrapped the silk scarf, letting dark chestnut hair cascade down her shoulders. She shook her head slightly, settling the waves. It was Sarah. But it wasn't the Sarah he knew. The Sarah he knew wore yoga pants and minimal makeup. The Sarah he knew had a soft, apologetic voice. This woman sat with a spine of steel. Her makeup was flawless, sharp, accentuating the high cheekbones he usually ignored. She wore a tailored suit underneath the coat that screamed power. Adrian's mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked at Simon. Simon was staring at the floor, trembling. Hello, Adrian, Sarah said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It was cool, detached, and devoid of any warmth, It was a business voice. Sarah. Adrian finally choked out. What? What are you doing here? Did you follow me? He felt a surge of panic, then anger. Sarah, I am in the middle of a crucial meeting. You cannot just barge in here. How did you even get past security? He turned to the bodyguards. Who let her in? This is my wife. He turned back to Sarah, his face reddening. Honey, look, I know you're suspicious, but this is work. You're embarrassing yourself. You need to leave. Now. From the corner, Chloe let out a small, confused sound. Wait, that's Sarah. Sarah didn't look at Chloe. She didn't even acknowledge Chloe existed. She kept her eyes locked on Adrian. Sit down, Adrian, Sarah commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order given by someone who was used to being obeyed. I'm not sitting down, Adrian hissed. Where is the investor, Simon? Where is the representative from Artemis Trust? Simon looked up, his face grey. He pointed a shaking finger at Sarah. She is the representative, Adrian, Simon whispered. She is Artemis Trust. The silence that followed was absolute. Adrian laughed. It was a brittle, frantic sound. That's ridiculous. Sarah is a housewife. She volunteers at the library. She doesn't know the difference between equity and debt. Sarah leaned forward, interlacing her fingers on the table. A massive diamond ring, not her wedding ring, but a solitaire that looked like ice flashed under the lounge lights. That was your first mistake, Adrian, Sarah said calmly. Assuming that because I chose to support you, I was incapable of surpassing you. She signaled to one of the bodyguards. He opened the metal briefcase. Inside was not cash, but a single, thick file folder. Artemis Trust. Sarah began, her voice steady. Is the venture capital arm of the Sterling family estate. My family estate. Your family, Adrian scoffed. Your dad was a mechanic in Ohio. My stepfather was a mechanic, Sarah corrected. My biological father was William H. Vanderbilt IV. He died before I was born. I was adopted. I didn't access the trust until I turned 40 last year. Adrian felt the room spinning. Vanderbilt Trust. I kept it quiet, Sarah continued, because I wanted to see if you could build this company on your own. I wanted to see if the man I married was a man of integrity. She paused, her gaze finally flickering over to Chloe, who was shrinking into her chair, realizing she was very, very out of her depth. I see I have my answer, Sarah said. Adrian scrambled to process this. Sarah, baby. Wait, you have money. You have that kind of money. I have all the money, Adrian, she said simply, and right now I hold the mortgage on your office building, the lien on our house, and the debt notes for Sterling Dynamics. I bought them all through shell companies over the last 6 months. Adrian slumped into the chair opposite her. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. Why? He whispered. Because I knew, Sarah said. I've known about the embezzlement for a year. I've known about her. She gestured vaguely at Chloe. Since you hired her. So you're here to save me? Adrian grasped at a straw of hope. You bought the debt to save the company. Because we're family. Sarah smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It was the smile of a predator looking at wounded prey. Save you? Sarah laughed softly. Oh, Adrian, I didn't come here to invest. I came here to liquidate. She opened the folder. This is a hostile takeover, darling, and you have exactly 10 minutes to sign over your remaining shares and resign as CEO, or I release the evidence of your embezzlement to the SEC and the FBI. Adrian looked at the papers. Then he looked at his wife. For the first time in 20 years, he saw her. Really saw her. And he realized he was looking at a stranger who held a guillotine blade right above his neck. But first, Sarah said, her eyes shifting to Chloe, let's talk about your travel companion. The silence in the VIP lounge was broken only by the faint hum of the espresso machine in the far corner. Adrian sat paralyzed, his gaze bouncing between the unrecognizable woman who was his wife and the terrifying folder on the table. Sarah didn't look at the folder. She was looking past Adrian, towards the window seat, where Chloe was trying very hard to become invisible. "Miss Evans," Sarah said. Her voice was polite, distant, the way one speaks to a receptionist they don't plan on remembering. "Chloe Evans, 24, marketing coordinator. Salary $55,000 a year before taxes. Current residence a one-bedroom apartment in Murray Hill that Adrian pays for." Chloe bristled, her survival instincts finally kicking in. She sat up straighter, adjusting the lapels of her blazer. "Excuse me. Who do you think you are?" "You don't know me." Sarah tilted her head. "I know everything about you, Chloe. I know you graduated from Arizona State with a 2.8 GPA. I know you have $30,000 in student loan debt that you haven't made a payment on in 6 months because Adrian told you he'd handle it. I know you prefer Pinot Grigio over Chardonnay and that you're allergic to shellfish." Sarah tapped a manicured fingernail on the table. "And I know you are currently wearing a Cartier Love bracelet, yellow gold retail value, approximately $7,000 purchased last Tuesday on Adrian's American Express Centurion card." Chloe smirked, glancing at Adrian for backup. "So he loves me. He likes to spoil me. That's more than you can say, apparently. Maybe if you paid more attention to your husband, he wouldn't be buying me jewelry." Adrian flinched. He wanted to tackle Chloe to stop her talking. She had no idea what beast she was poking. Sarah didn't even blink. A small, icy smile touched the corners of her mouth. "Adrian didn't buy you that bracelet, Chloe," Sarah said softly. "I did?" Chloe frowned. "What? The Centurion card," Sarah explained patiently, as if talking to a slow child. "It's a supplementary card attached to the primary account. My account. Adrian hasn't qualified for his own primary line of uncapped credit in 3 years. I hold the primary agreements. I saw the charge come through immediately. I approved it." Adrian felt sick. He remembered the notification on his phone, the approved text. He had assumed it was just the bank's automated system. Sarah turned her eyes to Adrian. "I've been funding your affair for the last 8 months, Adrian. The dinners at Le Bernardin, the weekend trips to Miami, the apartment rent. All of it. Paid for by the wife you thought was too stupid to notice." Chloe looked down at the bracelet on her wrist. It suddenly looked like a shackle. "Why?" Adrian whispered, horrified. "Why let me do it?" "Research and development," Sarah said coldly. "I needed to see how far you'd go. I needed to see if you had any bottom line. You don't. You spent 50 grand of my money on her in 3 months while you were telling me we couldn't afford to re-tile the guest bathroom." Sarah turned back to Chloe. The amusement was gone from her face, replaced by hard granite. "Now, Miss Evans, here is the reality of your situation. You are holding a first-class ticket to Zurich that was purchased with stolen company funds. That makes you an accessory to wire fraud. The jewelry you are wearing is considered proceeds from criminal activity. Chloe gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I didn't know. He told me he was rich. He lied, Sarah said simply. Men like him always lie to girls like you. Now I have two options for you. Option A, you stay here, and when the FBI arrives in about 20 minutes to arrest Adrian, they can take you in for questioning too. You'll lose your job, your reputation, and you'll likely face charges. Sarah leaned forward. Option B, you take off that bracelet, put it on the table. Pick up your economy class bag and walk out of this airport. You forget you ever met Adrian Sterling. You disappear from his life and mine permanently. Chloe didn't hesitate for a second. She practically tore the bracelet off her wrist, scratching her skin in the process. It clattered loudly onto the metal table. She grabbed her laptop and her oversized tote bag. She stood up, her face streaked with sudden tears of panic. "Chloe, wait," Adrian said weakly, reaching a hand out. "Don't just leave." Chloe looked at him with pure, undiluted venom. The facade of the adoring mistress vanished. "You broke-lying piece of trash," she hissed. "You almost got me arrested." She looked at Sarah, a strange mix of fear and respect in her eyes. "I'm going. I'm gone. I never knew him." "Smart girl," Sarah murmured. Chloe fled the VIP lounge, her high heels clicking frantically on the polished floor, almost colliding with a waiter carrying a silver tray. The sound of the closing automatic door felt final. Adrian stared at the door. He was alone. The entourage was gone. The fantasy was over. It was just him, the bodyguards and the terrifying stranger wearing his wife's face. "She didn't even say goodbye," Adrian mumbled in shock. "Did you expect her to?" Sarah asked, reaching for the expensive scotch Adrian had abandoned. She took a sip, grimaced slightly, and set it down. "She was an employee, Adrian. You stopped being able to pay her salary. The transaction is over." She pushed the metal briefcase toward him. "Now, let's discuss the transaction that isn't over." Adrian couldn't take his eyes off the bracelet sitting on the table between them. It glittered under the recessed lighting, a golden symbol of his utter stupidity. "How long?" Adrian managed to ask, his voice rasping. "How long have you been planning this?" Sarah settled back into her chair, crossing her legs elegantly. The bodyguards took a step back, fading into the periphery, silent sentinels, ensuring Adrian didn't try anything foolish. "Do you remember that trip you took to Dubai last November?" Sarah asked. "The tech summit, where you said you were meeting Saudi investors." Adrian nodded mutely. He remembered it well. He had spent 4 days in a penthouse suite at the Burj Al Arab, with a high-end escort billing the entire thing to Sterling Dynamics under client acquisition. "I knew you were lying the moment you walked out the door with that new Toomey suitcase," Sarah said. "You always overpack when you're cheating. It's a tell, but I let it go. I figured it was just another midlife crisis cliché." She paused, smoothing the fabric of her cashmere coat. "Then a week later, I was organizing your home office. I found a receipt you'd carelessly stuffed into a blazer pocket. It was for a burner phone." Adrian closed his eyes. Rookie mistake. "Why does a man running a legitimate tech company need an untraceable burner phone?" Sarah posited. "He doesn't. That's when I stopped being your wife and started being an investigator." "You could have just asked me," Adrian pleaded, trying to channel the charm that had worked on her for 2 decades. "Sarah, baby, we could have talked about it. Marriage counseling." Sarah actually laughed out loud. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Counseling Adrian, you weren't having an emotional affair. You were looting our future." She gestured to the file. "I hired Kroll, the corporate investigations firm. Best in the business. Cost me a fortune, but they are thorough. They put forensic accountants on your company books without you ever knowing." Adrian felt a cold sweat break across his forehead. Kroll was legendary. If they had looked at his books, they had seen everything. The inflated vendor invoices, the kickbacks from suppliers, the siphoning of R&D funds into offshore shell accounts in Belize. "They found the rot within 48 hours, Sarah said. "Sterling Dynamics hasn't turned a real profit in 4 years, has it? You've just been moving debt around, robbing Peter to pay Paul, keeping the stock price artificially inflated with press releases about non-existent AI breakthroughs." Adrian stared at the table. It was a temporary liquidity issue. The market is tough right now. I just needed a bridge to the next product launch. "Lies," Sarah said sharply. "You were bleeding the company dry to fund your lifestyle because you knew it was going to collapse anyway. You were trying to secure your own lifeboat while the ship went down, taking your employees and me with it." She leaned in closer, her hazel eyes hard as diamonds. "When Kroll showed me the numbers, I didn't cry. I didn't throw things. A strange calm came over me. It was like waking up from a 20-year coma. I realized the man I loved didn't exist. You were just a parasite." "Sarah, don't say that," Adrian choked out. "I love you." "Tom, stop it," she commanded. "You love yourself. You loved the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes when I believed in you." She tapped the folder. "That's when I decided I wasn't going to be your victim. I was going to be your executioner. I remembered the Vanderbilt Trust, my birthright that I had ignored because I wanted a normal life with you. Well, normal was over." She explained the mechanics of his destruction with the dispassionate tone of a surgeon detailing a procedure. "I contacted the trustees of the Artemis estate. I activated my full inheritance. It was substantial. Far more than even I realized. Billions, Adrian. Real liquid capital, not the smoke and mirrors you play with." Adrian felt dizzy. Billions. He had been living with a billionaire for 20 years and had her clipping coupons for groceries. "I set up a holding company in Luxembourg, Project Nemesis. A bit dramatic, I know, but I was feeling emotional at the time," she said dryly. "Then I started buying your primary lender, Silicon Valley Bank of Commerce. They were nervous about your debt-to-equity ratio. They were practically begging someone to take your loan portfolio off their hands. I bought it for 80 cents on the dollar." Adrian remembered when the bank had suddenly stopped calling him for updates. He thought he had dodged a bullet. He had actually walked into a sniper's scope. "Then I went after your vendors, the chip suppliers in Taiwan, the server farms in Nevada. You owed them millions, and you were 90 days late on payments. I bought their debt notes too." Sarah spread her hands. "Basically, Adrian, every single person you owe money to. You don't owe them anymore. You owe me. I own every brick of Sterling Dynamics, every patent, every swivel chair, and every dollar of debt you've accumulated. And you set up this meeting." Adrian realized the full scope of the trap finally clicking into place. The angel investor. Simon. "Simon works for me now," Sarah confirmed. "He was very compliant once I showed him proof that he was knowingly helping you defraud investors. I told him to find you a savior, a mysterious woman with deep pockets who wanted to meet at the airport for a dramatic last-minute deal. You're so predictable, Adrian. You love the drama of the big win. I knew you wouldn't be able to resist." She stood up and walked slowly around the table to stand behind him. She placed her hands on his shoulders. They felt heavy, cold. "I wanted you to feel the high one last time," she whispered into his ear. "I wanted you to sit here feeling like the king of the world with your little mistress and your expensive scotch, thinking you had gotten away with it all. Because the higher you are, baby, the harder you fall." She squeezed his shoulders hard, then released him and walked back to her seat. "And now," Sarah declared, "we hit the ground." Adrian stared at the folder. He knew he shouldn't open it, but his hands moved of their own volition. He flipped back the cover. The first page was a summary written by the Kroll accountants. It was a death warrant. Subject: Adrian Sterling / Sterling Dynamics. Findings: gross misappropriation of funds, wire fraud, 14 counts, tax evasion. Estimated $4.2 million. Falsification of corporate records to mislead shareholders. He flipped the page. It was a bank statement from Apex Holdings Limited in the Cayman Islands. It showed transfers totaling $6 million over the last 2 years, moving directly from Sterling Dynamics operating accounts into Adrian's personal offshore stash. He flipped again. Emails. Emails he thought he had permanently deleted. Conversations with his CFO, conspiring to inflate the Q3 earnings report. Adrian slammed the folder shut. He felt like he was going to vomit. These are stolen," Adrian stammered, trying to regain some footing, any footing. "You can't use these. It's inadmissible. Fruit of the poisonous tree." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Suddenly you're a legal scholar, Adrian. This isn't a court of law. Not yet. This is a negotiation in an airport lounge. And even if I couldn't use them, which I can because my investigators obtained them legally through whistleblowers in your IT department. Do you really want to take that chance?" She leaned forward. "Do you want the FBI knocking on your door tomorrow morning? Do you want the perp walk, handcuffs, media vans, the whole show? Imagine the headlines, tech visionary unmasked as common thief. Imagine what that does to your legacy, to your mother." The mention of his mother stung. She was 70 proud and believed the sun rose and set on her successful son. This would kill her. "What do you want, Sarah?" Adrian asked, defeated. The fight had drained out of him. He was just tired and terrified. "I want what is mine," Sarah said. "Everything." She signaled to the bodyguard on the left, a man whose neck was wider than Adrian's head. He stepped forward and placed a sleek black tablet on the table in front of Adrian. It was displaying a DocuSign contract. "The terms of surrender," Sarah announced. Adrian looked down at the screen. "Agreement for the transfer of assets and resignation of executive duties." "Read it," Sarah said. Adrian scrolled with a trembling finger. The terms were brutal. Adrian Sterling agrees to immediately resign as CEO and chairman of the board of Sterling Dynamics, effective immediately. Adrian Sterling agrees to transfer all personally held voting shares and stock options to the Artemis Trust. Sarah Sterling for a total consideration of $1. Adrian Sterling agrees to vacate the Tribeca penthouse within 48 hours. The property is now sole owned by Sarah Sterling under foreclosure proceedings. Adrian Sterling acknowledges full responsibility for the corporate debt and agrees to a lifetime non-compete clause in the technology sector. There was more. They were taking his car. They were freezing his personal accounts to recoup the embezzled funds. They were leaving him with nothing but the clothes on his back and the fake reputation he had built. This leaves me destitute," Adrian whispered, looking up at her. "Sarah, I'll have nothing. How am I supposed to live $1 for my entire life's work? Your life's work is a fraud, Adrian. It has a negative value. I'm doing you a favor by taking it off your hands for $1. She paused, her eyes softening slightly, not with affection but with a semblance of pity. There is a clause at the bottom. Section 12. Read it. Adrian scrolled to the end. Section 12. In exchange for full compliance with all terms listed above, the Artemis Trust and Sarah Sterling agree to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding the criminal activities detailed in the attached evidence folder. The evidence will be sealed and destroyed after a period of 5 years, provided Adrian Sterling breaches no part of this agreement. The transition of power will be framed publicly as a strategic retirement due to health reasons to protect share value. It's the only lifeline you're going to get, Adrian, Sarah said quietly. You sign and you get to walk away. You'll be broke, yes. You'll be divorced. You'll be starting over at 42 with a ruined credit score. But you won't be in federal prison. You won't be a convicted felon. She checked her diamond watch. My flight to Zurich leaves in 45 minutes. I have to get to the gate. You have 3 minutes to decide. Sign the tablet, or I hand that folder to the 2 gentlemen behind you who are actually retired U.S. Marshals I hired for the day, and they will detain you until the FBI arrives. The silence stretched. Adrian looked at the tablet. He looked at the door where Chloe had fled. He looked at his wife, the billionaire stranger who held his life in her manicured hands. He realized with stark clarity that the Adrian Sterling who walked into this lounge, the arrogant CEO, the lover, the master of the universe, was already dead. With a shaking hand, Adrian picked up the stylus. He didn't read the rest of the contract. He just scrolled to the signature line. He signed his name. It looked spindly weak, like a child's scrawl. The tablet beeped, confirming the transaction. Sarah stood up. The bodyguards moved instantly to her sides. One of them picked up the tablet and the folder of evidence. Sarah adjusted her sunglasses, sliding them back onto her face, shielding her eyes once more. Goodbye, Adrian, she said, her voice devoid of any emotion at all. Try not to miss your flight home. Oh wait, you don't have a ticket anymore. I cancelled yours when I bought Chloe's. She turned and walked toward the exit, her entourage trailing in her wake like a powerful current. Adrian sat alone in the silence of the VIP lounge, the scent of expensive leather and bergamot, suddenly cloying, choking him. He stared at the empty Scotch glass, the golden bracelet Chloe left behind, and realized he had just signed away his entire existence for a single $1. The descent from the VIP lounge was not a metaphorical one. It was a physical humiliation. After Sarah left, Adrian sat for another 10 minutes, staring at the wall until the concierge politely informed him that his access to the Sovereign Suite had been revoked. The membership linked to the corporate account was dead. Adrian stood up. His legs felt like lead. He walked out of the lounge past the velvet rope and into the general terminal population. The noise hit him like a physical blow, crying babies, blaring announcements, the smell of fast food grease replacing the scent of bergamot. He reached into his pocket for his phone to call an Uber Black. He needed to get home, regroup, and call a lawyer. Surely he could fight this. Duress coercion. He opened the Uber app. Payment method declined. He frowned and tried his personal visa. Declined. He tried his debit card. Declined. A cold numbness spread through his fingers. She hadn't waited 48 hours. She had frozen the assets immediately. The security team she mentioned must have triggered the digital lockout the moment his signature hit that tablet. Adrian checked his wallet. He had $40 in cash. He walked out of the terminal, bypassing the black car line he had used for 15 years, and stood in the freezing wind at the taxi stand. He took a yellow cab. "Tribeca," Adrian told the driver, "a weary man named Constantine. And take the bridge, not the tunnel. I'm short on cash." The ride was a blur of grey highway and panic. When they pulled up to the penthouse building, a gleaming glass needle in the sky, where Adrian had felt like a god, the doorman, Henry, was standing outside. Henry had known Adrian for 10 years. He had walked Adrian's dog. He had accepted Adrian's Christmas tips. Adrian stepped out of the cab, handing the driver his last $40. He walked toward the glass doors. Henry stepped in front of him. He didn't smile. "Mr. Sterling," Henry said, his voice dropping an octave. "I can't let you up." "What are you talking about, Henry?" "It's me. I live here." "Not anymore, sir," Henry said, looking uncomfortable but firm. "Mrs. Sterling called the building management an hour ago. The locks have been digitally rekeyed. She said you are to be provided with—" Henry reached behind the podium and pulled out a small cardboard box. "This." Adrian stared at the box. It contained a few toiletries, a change of clothes, sweatpants, and a t-shirt, and a sealed envelope. "My things," Adrian stammered. "My suits, my watches, my computer. The apartment is being staged for inventory, sir. Mrs. Sterling was very specific. No unauthorized entry. Security is on the way down if you refuse to leave." Adrian took the box. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single key and a post-it note in Sarah's handwriting. 32 B Oak Street, Queens. It's paid through the end of the month. After that, you're on your own. S. Adrian knew the address. It was a rental property his company had bought years ago to house junior developers visiting from overseas. It was a basement studio in a run-down part of Astoria. It started to rain. Adrian stood on the sidewalk of the life he used to own, holding a cardboard box, wearing a $5,000 suit that was now the only asset he possessed. He didn't have money for the subway. He began to walk. It was a long walk from Tribeca to the Queensboro Bridge. As he trudged through the rain, his Italian leather shoes soaking through his phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Wall Street Journal. Breaking Adrian Sterling. Steps down as CEO of Sterling Dynamics, citing severe health issues. Sarah Sterling, heiress to Vanderbilt Artemis. Fortune named interim CEO. He stopped on a street corner, water dripping from his nose onto the screen. He clicked the article. There was a photo of Sarah looking powerful and serene. The article didn't mention the fraud. It didn't mention the mistress. It painted Adrian as a tragic figure, a man struck down by illness in his prime, and Sarah as the noble wife stepping up to preserve his legacy. It was the perfect cover story. It destroyed him by saving him. He couldn't scream the truth without admitting he was a criminal. He was trapped in her narrative. Adrian looked up at the grey sky and let out a scream that was swallowed instantly by the roar of the city traffic. 6 months later. The boardroom of Sterling Dynamics had changed. The foosball table Adrian had installed in the corner was gone, replaced by a bookshelf filled with technical manuals and financial regulations. The kegerator was gone. The Move Fast and Break Things neon sign had been taken down. Sarah sat at the head of the table. She wore a navy power suit, her hair pulled back in a sharp, no-nonsense ponytail. "The Q3 numbers are in," announced David, the new CFO Sarah had poached from Goldman Sachs. Since we cut the blue sky vanity projects and focused on the core logistics, AI operating costs are down 40%. Revenue is up 22%. Sarah nodded, reviewing the tablet in front of her. Good. And the debt restructuring. The Artemis Trust officially absorbed the toxic assets last week, David confirmed. We are in the black, Sarah. For the first time in company history, Sterling Dynamics is actually profitable. Not Silicon Valley profitable. Real-world profitable. A murmur of approval went around the table. The board members who had initially been skeptical of the housewife taking over now looked at her with reverence. She hadn't just saved the ship. She had turned it into a battleship. What about the pending lawsuits regarding the previous administration? Sarah asked, her voice cool. Settled, the general counsel replied. The NDA you had Mr. Sterling sign was ironclad. The SEC is satisfied with our internal audit and the restitution paid by the trust. They've closed the file on Adrian. Excellent, Sarah said. Then let's get to work on the expansion. Later that evening, Sarah stood in her office, Adrian's old office. She had changed the furniture. The leather couch where Adrian used to nap, and likely other things, was gone. The room was airy, filled with plants. Her assistant buzzed in. Mrs. Sterling, there's a visitor in the lobby. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he knows you. Sarah checked the time. Who is it? He says his name is Adrian. Sarah paused. She walked to the window, looking out over the city lights. She felt a flicker of something not love, not hate, just a distant memory of pain. Send him up, she said. 5 minutes later, Adrian walked in. He looked different. The grey at his temples had spread. He had lost weight, and not in a good way. He was wearing a suit, but it was ill-fitting, likely bought off the rack at a department store. He looked tired, defeated. Hello, Adrian, Sarah said, not moving from behind her desk. Sarah, Adrian said. His voice was hoarse. He looked around the office. You changed the curtains. I changed everything, she corrected. I saw the quarterly report, Adrian said, shifting his weight awkwardly. You're doing, well, better than I did. I'm actually working, Adrian, not playing CEO. Adrian sighed, slumping into one of the guest chairs. Look, Sarah, I'm struggling. No one will hire me. The health issues story. People think I'm a liability. Or they've heard whispers. I've applied for consulting gigs, sales jobs. Nothing. I'm working at a copy shop in Queens. Minimum wage. He looked up at her, his eyes wet. I can't live like this. I know I screwed up. But did I deserve this total annihilation? Sarah looked at him. She remembered the nights she sat up waiting for him, the lies, the smell of Chloe's perfume on his shirts, the way he looked at her like she was furniture. You signed the deal, Adrian, she said softly. I need a loan, he begged. Just 10 grand to get a decent apartment. I'll pay you back. Please, for the sake of the 20 years we had. Sarah opened her drawer. She pulled out a checkbook. Adrian's eyes lit up with pathetic hope. She wrote a check. She ripped it out and slid it across the desk. Adrian grabbed it. He looked at the amount. $1. He looked up confused. $1. The sale price of your dignity, Sarah said. I don't owe you money, Adrian. I owe you a lesson. You spent 20 years thinking you were the smartest person in the room, using people as stepping stones. Now you're at the bottom. If you want to climb back up, you do it the way I did. You work for it. Without shortcuts. Without lies. She stood up. Keep the dollar. Frame it. Let it remind you of what you're actually worth when you strip away the lies. Sarah. Get out, Adrian. I have a company to run. Adrian stared at her. He saw no mercy in her eyes, only a mirror reflecting his own failures. He crumpled the check in his fist and turned to leave. As he reached the door, Sarah spoke one last time. Oh, and Adrian. I saw Chloe last week. Adrian froze. You did. She's waiting tables at a bistro in the West Village. She asked how you were. I told her I didn't know. Sarah smiled a genuine, sharp smile. She didn't ask for your number. The grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel did not just smell of money. It smelled of victory. It was a sensory overload of expensive perfumes, oud jasmine and santal, mingling with the scent of wild mushroom tartlets and vintage champagne. The air conditioning was set to a precise, crisp temperature, keeping the captains of industry cool in their tuxedos and the heiresses comfortable in their backless gowns. It had been exactly 1 year since the collapse of the old sterling dynamics and the rise of the new empire. Tonight was the coronation. The New York Tech Innovators of the Year Gala was the kind of event where a single ticket cost more than most people earned in 6 months. It was a room filled with sharks, visionaries, and survivors. In the center of it all, bathed in the warm, golden glow of the stage lights, stood Sarah Sterling. She was unrecognizable from the woman who had once quietly knitted in the background of Adrian's life. She wore a gown of emerald green silk that draped over her frame like liquid armor, striking against the sea of black tuxedos. Her hair, once loose and modest, was styled in a sleek architectural wave. She didn't look like a wife or a widow or a stand-in. She looked like a monarch. And now, the host, a famous tech journalist, with a booming voice announced for the evening's highest honor, the Phoenix Award for Corporate Resurrection and Ethical Leadership. Please welcome the CEO, who turned a sinking ship into a global fleet. Sarah Sterling. The applause was not polite. It was thunderous. It was the sound of respect earned in the trenches of balance sheets and board meetings. People stood up. Competitors who had tried to buy her out for pennies a year ago were now clapping the loudest, hoping to catch her eye. Far away from the spotlight in the dimly lit service corridor, connecting the ballroom to the kitchen, a man stood in the shadows. Adrian adjusted his bow tie. It was a clip-on made of cheap polyester that chafed his neck. His tuxedo jacket was 2 sizes too big in the shoulders and tight around the waist, a generic uniform issued by the catering agency. He held a silver tray, piled high with empty champagne flutes, the stems sticky with the dregs of expensive wine. He wasn't supposed to be watching. He was assigned to the cleanup crew, Zone 4, which meant he was responsible for clearing the debris of the rich. But when he heard her name over the speakers, his feet had stopped moving of their own accord. He peered through the small circular window of the swinging service door. He saw her walk to the podium. He saw the way she held herself, shoulders back, chin high, not a trace of the hesitation he used to mistake for weakness. Thank you. Sarah spoke into the microphone. Her voice was amplified, filling the cavernous room clear and resonant. This award is heavy. The crowd chuckled dutifully. It's heavy, she continued, her face serious, because it carries the weight of everyone who was told they were just something, just a spectator, just a supporter, just a background character in someone else's story. Adrian felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the cheap collar. He remembered telling her years ago that she wouldn't understand the complexities of his business. He remembered the dismissive wave of his hand when she asked about the accounts. We often mistake noise for power, Sarah said, scanning the room, her eyes glittering under the lights. We mistake arrogance for vision, but true innovation isn't about how loud you can shout about your success. It's about the quiet, unglamorous work of cleaning up the mess and building something real on the foundation of truth. She paused, and the room was so silent you could hear the ice melting in the buckets. I accept this for my team, she finished, and for anyone who had to burn their life down to find out who they really were in the ashes. The ovation resumed louder than before. Flashbulbs popped in a blinding staccato rhythm, immortalizing her triumph. Man, she is something else, isn't she? Adrian jumped slightly. A busboy had come up beside him, balancing a stack of dessert plates. The kid looked young, maybe 19, with acne scars and bright, eager eyes. Yeah, Adrian whispered, his throat dry. She is. I read about her in Forbes, the kid whispered, eager to gossip during their unauthorized break. Took over her husband's company after he went crazy or got sick or something. They say she fired half the board in the first week. Ruthless. But look at her now. She's a legend. Adrian looked down at his hands. They were chapped from the industrial dish soap, the fingernails trimmed short and rough. The hands of a laborer. You think he's here? The kid asked, craning his neck to see the stage. The husband, Adrian Sterling. Adrian flinched at the sound of his own name. It sounded foreign, like a word from a dead language. I heard he retired to a private island, the kid continued, spinning his own fantasy. Probably sitting on a beach somewhere, drinking Mai Tais, living off her money. Lucky guy, right? Adrian stared through the glass window one last time. He watched Sarah laugh at something the host said. She looked free. She looked lighter than she had in 20 years, unburdened by the dead weight of his ego. No, Adrian said quietly. The resignation in his voice was absolute. He's not on an island. Oh. The kid looked at him. You know something. Where is he then? Adrian tightened his grip on the silver tray, the metal digging into his palm. He's gone. He doesn't exist anymore. The kid shrugged, losing interest. Well, shame. He's missing a hell of a party. The shrimp alone cost more than my tuition. On stage, Sarah raised the crystal trophy high, a beacon of her victory. For a split second, her gaze seemed to sweep across the room, past the adoring billionaires, past the cameras, and land on the service door. Adrian held his breath, but her eyes didn't linger. They moved on, bright and unburdened. She didn't see him. Why would she? She was looking at the future, and he was just a ghost from the past, standing in the dark with the dirty dishes. Sterling, hey, move it. The harsh shout of the shift manager, a frantic man with a clipboard, shattered the moment. I've got tables on the north terrace that look like a bomb went off. Stop daydreaming and get back to the pit. Yes, sir, Adrian said automatically. Going now. He turned his back on the golden light of the ballroom. He pushed through the heavy swinging doors, leaving the music and the applause behind, stepping into the humid, clanging chaos of the kitchen. The contrast was instant. The smell of perfume was replaced by the stench of wet garbage and steam. The sound of violins was drowned out by the roar of the industrial dishwasher and the shouting of line cooks. Adrian walked to the large stainless steel sink in the corner, the pit. Piles of dirty plates smeared with half-eaten filet mignon and truffle sauce awaited him. He set his tray down. He took off his tuxedo jacket and hung it on a hook, revealing the sweat-stained white shirt underneath. He rolled up his sleeves. He picked up a sponge and a steel wool scrubber. The water was scalding hot, but he plunged his hands in without flinching. He scrubbed a plate. then another, then another. There was no negotiation here, no board members to charm, no investors to dazzle with lies, no mistress to impress. There was just the plate, the dirt, and the work. "Faster, Sterling," the manager barked from across the line. "I'm on it," Adrian muttered. He looked at his reflection in the stainless steel backsplash. The man staring back was older, greyer, and tired. The arrogance was gone, scraped away like the food on the plates. Outside the service entrance, snow began to fall on New York City. It covered the limousines waiting for the guests. It covered the penthouse balconies in Tribeca. It covered the streets of Queens, where Adrian would take the bus home in 3 hours. The snow fell silently, layer by layer, burying the history of Adrian Sterling, leaving nothing but a blank white page for the man washing dishes to stare at. He picked up the next plate. He scrubbed. And for the first time in his life, he simply did the work. And that is the story of Adrian and Sra. It's a brutal reminder that in the game of life and business, you should never mistake kindness for weakness, and you should never, ever underestimate the person who holds your foundation together. Adrian thought he was the king, but he forgot that in chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. What do you think? Was Sarah's punishment too harsh? Or did Adrian get exactly what he deserved? I'd love to hear your take in the comments below, especially about that final scene in the kitchen. If you enjoyed this story of betrayal, revenge, and justice, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell, so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you cross.